Good. How are you? Good. So good afternoon. I am Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee, the first for 2020 on Wednesday, January 22nd, 2020. I'm joined today by my colleagues, Councilmember Mitchell Farrell, Councilmember John Lee, and Councilmember David Ryu. I know we do have a couple of public speakers, so we will go ahead and we have multiple we got two public speakers for general public comment and multiple items. So Ms. Antonia Ramirez. So you have 2 minutes for items on the agenda and 1 minute for general public comment.
Thank you very much. Number one, LAPD, it is my hope that you will not doctor the crime statistics as UCLA has done. Furthermore, I do believe LAPD female Carranza, where she alleged that the crimes in downtown LA and the city of LA are truly staggering, but not actually portrayed for political reasons. She was retaliated against. Number two, I have yet to see the LA County Victim Service Program working. I don't recommend any grants, whether from the state or the federal government, because it hasn't helped the true victims of crime, theft, and displacement, yet has helped all the criminal, violent predator motherfuckers. Number four, this is the Ramirez Crime Statistics Report. Criminal Chango Latino wetbacks, gangbangers, and skid row niggers, and white trash junkies, who mostly are bisexual, trannies, faggots, lesbos, are the ones committing all homeless and city and county crimes. Number five, the fucking corrupted, unethical, pandering pussy city attorney Michael Feuer has yet to enforce and prosecute all the violent criminal offenders like your neighborhood skid row niggers, your white trash junkies, your Chango Latino wetbacks, and gangbangers who have taken the city residents hostage. That is why we have an opiate, drug, theft, police, and firemen high suicide rate and gang violence epidemic. Fire these fucking attorneys and get some real ones like Superman, goddammit. Number six, instead of a fast vehicle, I suggest a high-powered combat jet with a brave, brilliant fighter jock. You want to go supersonic, baby. None of this turtle pace. Number seven, the new slave masters are the niggers, where they prostitute these young, white, Asian, Latina girls against their will. They use them up and infect them with every disease and dump them in late at night at La Placita with practically no clothing on in the cold or the heat, and they push them and shove them and throw them against the walls. I've had to take license plate number and report to the CHP and the LAPD. You're goddamn right, I'm proactive. And number nine, stand by your man. I say stand by your cop. Use this grant to help deter firemen and police officers' high suicide rate and start commending them and calling thugs gangbangers and condemn the pussy cops who reward the niggers and the gangbangers. Call them what they are. And next one, I highly recommend all LAPD officers and air support pilots, hello pilots, you know your studs, and sheriff's deputies wear a body-worn camera to defend them against all fake allegations against them by these slimy, unethical, corrupted legal hack attorneys. And this too will help deter police suicide rate. And number 12, thanks to LAPD for patrolling the metro and the bus depots and the train stations. We are so grateful. Every time I see LAPD, I am so blessed. Number 16, we say stop the loud boombox, rap crap noise at La Placita by the niggers and the gangbangers late at night. And number 17, go to La Placita and you will see what we Mexicans and Latinas and white Asians and homeless women and elderly and military veterans. We are bullied, attacked, harassed, urinated on, threatened, and violently mob lynched by these fucking niggers, gangbangers, and wetbacks.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Eric, no, you already had, that was included, your 1 minute general public comment. Thank you. Eric Previn, you have, let's see. So Eric, you have items 1, 4, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 20, and general public comment.
Thank you. It's Eric Previn from Studio City, and a couple of the items today caught my attention. One, I just want to call out the Administrative Citation Enforcement Program, ACE. I know that we looked at the numbers here, and we've, there was a Times article about a week ago about how I think we're being sued over that one for not providing the kind of due process that people expect. This is a tough area because we're trying to go away from pernicious misdemeanor like assessments and citations too. But a lot of these are for public drinking. And so, again, it raises the question of, this was an Englander idea, so today's see the results of what Mr. Englander has done. I don't know. I don't think it's looking that good to me because it's small numbers, and I don't think it works. I wish that there was something better, but it's upsetting. The body cam package, we got a grant today. I just want to strum the old banjo. Axon, formerly Taser, made a very big $70 million deal before the chief stepped in when Charlie Beck was around. And, they stuck 4,400 tasers under the jump seat of the truck, which the public was a little surprised because today in City Council, as O'Farrell will look down, we had the Mears versus City of LA. This was a lawsuit where a guy unfortunately deceased after multiple tases. They tased him to death, evidently. We appealed, lost, and now it's $5.75 million. That $6 million almost is what I have been asking, and I hope John Lee will get into this. Axon owes the city of Los Angeles about $6 million because they ran a program that was, if you opt in to our body cam policy, we will comp the first year. Well, they did that right after LA spent almost $70 million. So we need the refund. We have some significant law enforcement needs. I've been very pleased with the CARE program working. We've reduced some of the need of LAPD and some of that sanitation. We need to get the money that we're due. These guys are going around the country, and today we have to pay another $6 million. It's actually an extra almost million because we decided to appeal because it was untenable at the time to not appeal because we were piling up all these tasers that I believe are not effective. I don't think they really work. The Reuters reporting on that, if you know that, has been astonishing. And obviously there's two sides of the world. Half the world is trying to say, there's nothing dangerous about them at all. And the other half of the world is lying in a pile of death. So I think we have to minimize the use of tasers. We have an enormous homeless population. Is this the general included?
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
So let me just scan quickly to see. I'd like to thank Steve Needleman. Nobody appreciates the $21,000 for the basketball and the hockey more than the fire commissioners. So thank you on behalf of them.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Arnold Sachs, we have 2 minutes of, you have 2 minutes plus 1 minute for general public comment.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Quite a bit. So let's see. Slavery and trafficking. On the low-income hotels that are along the freeways, they circumvent the rules by leaving a door unlocked, and the traffickers know that room is unlocked, and they can just go in and out. They don't need a key. It should be checked out. By the way, what is real estate fraud? And there's one in here about the city attorney and public safety. And I'm wondering if the city attorney really understands what public safety is, because 17 refers to hate language. And you come in here, and you come to speeches, and all you hear is ethnic slurs and all kinds of cursing. And the city attorney says, well, the court said it's free speech. Well, free speech and hate speech are two different things. And when you let hate speech go, you ratchet up the violence level. And so you need to have a discussion with the city attorney, or you need to have somebody check it out with the Supreme Court about what's the difference. I was watching a PBS special on Richard Pryor about a week ago, the comic, black comic who was in LA, and he went to Africa, and when he came back, the story was that he stopped using the word nigger in his comedy routines because they didn't say it over in Africa. Yet here, in city council chambers, every other word is the N-word.
Is this your general public comment?
It's part of, hate language. It's hate language. So how does that work? How does a comedian like Richard Pryor, who was a fabulous comedian, decide, I'm not going to use that word, and yet every other person that comes into this shithole uses it? What does the city attorney say to that? Maybe you ought to watch the freaking biopic. Maybe you ought to watch the freaking biopic. I'm really concerned. I've always raised concerns at Metro about wrapping the rail cars. You know, if you're a highway patrolman and you put on too much of their window tint, you can't see in. Yet at Metro, they say, that's okay. Who gives a shit? What do you tell a widow, or what do you tell a widower when the officer gets shot? Where's the union on that? Where's the commission on that? You ride Metro, you see those cars? Do you ever take a peek? Would you want your child to go up there and not know what the fuck is going on the outside or the inside? And excuse my French. But it's ridiculous. And how come there are no blacks here on this commission? They're always bitching and moaning. They're at the sheriff's all the time, but they're not here. You can't get the opinion if
Thank
you're
you very much. Mr. Spindler? 2 minutes for multiple items and 1 minute for general public comment.
Welcome, little piggies. So we have here 2019 crime statistics. Crime is way, way, way up. And your police chief knows it, but he's going to tell you today it's down. And then in July, when the budget comes up, it'll start increasing in about February. That's a rope-a-dope. That's right. Monica, we need more money. Monica, we need more helicopters. Monica, we need more cops on the beat. That's right. Now, if you would have done what I told you, and again, he's not my biggest fan. The only city councilman capable of running this committee is Joe Buscaino, former cop. See, cops understand cops. Cops don't think like you. Cops think like me. They think like them. They're the devil in blue uniforms. See, you don't understand that. So please put Joe Buscaino as chairman of the Public Safety Committee. And I know, Nuri, you're listening. Please take my suggestion. Monica does not belong on this committee. No. She's trying to build housing for ICE to take little kids away from immigrants. She's busy in Arleta doing that. And I know you want that built because you get campaign donations from developers like y'all do. Look at John Lee. He's another one. He doesn't even graduate from college
Can
and
you
he
speak
lies.
to the items or go to general public
Liars,
comment?
yes, police. Look at the lying SOB. He kept saying he was a college graduate. Please arrest him for that. He's not a college graduate. Then we have body cameras. Body cameras everywhere. Cameras everywhere. They turn them off when they commit crime. They turn them back in. So, for example, a cop goes, hey, you're a fucking faggot. And then you go, you son of a... Then they turn it on. So then they book you, and then they don't have the rest of the video. You need to have automatic switches on those cameras. Big Brother needs to be turning them on and off randomly. So when they're in the back of their cars, on duty selling the drugs that they just got from all the drug dealers, you will know. So please, automatic switches on all body cameras randomly. Even John Lee likes that one, right? Of course. Then you want dispute resolution. I went to Mr. Plowden for my dispute resolution and I got fucked. No money. So you remember, settle these cases because you're getting sued up the fucking ass.
Thank you very much. That concludes general public comment and multiple speaker cards, so we will go ahead and close general public comment. Colleagues, I'd like to recommend that we take items 2, 3, 5, 6, 9 through 14, and 16 through 20 on consent.
No objection.
There's no objections. That'll be the order. And I'd like to invite our Chief of Police for item number 1, please.
Item 1, Los Angeles Police Department to make a presentation regarding 2019 crime statistics and initiatives.
Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon.
Chiefs.
Good afternoon.
Colleagues, I want to publicly acknowledge and thank our chief for being here today. Something that I jokingly made mention that Mr. Englander was not able to do, but
he did not ask me, for the record.
But again, my appreciation for you all making the time to be here with us this afternoon to review the progress of many of the department's initiatives, many of which we have discussed and have been supportive of here. Really grateful for the work of the men and women of this department, and just as a collective effort of how these numbers look for the start of this new decade. It's very promising. It shows a lot of diligence and effort and leadership in areas that it was sorely needed, particularly with the investments of technology that we've been making. But most importantly, our efforts towards achieving greater community policing efforts that will engender the trust of the people of Los Angeles. So I want to thank everyone for their efforts in this, but clearly we still always have opportunities for improvement. And so with that, I want to go ahead and first just turn it over to you, Chief, and have you go over some of our most recent gains.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to the other members of the Public Safety Committee. Happy New Year. Looking forward to a great start of a new decade. It is an honor to be here today. I'm representing the men and women 13,000 strong of LAPD, but I'm also joined by senior leadership that are also deserving of much of the praise and admiration in the sense of the leadership that we were able to forge and move forward in 2019. I'm joined today to my left by Assistant Chief Bobby Arcos. He's our Chief of Operations. For those that may be watching this video or this demonstration, this presentation today, he's basically responsible for the geographic operations in the 465 square miles of the city. On my right is Deputy Chief Chow and Commander Mark Reyna. Deputy Chief Chow oversees the Transit Services Bureau, which is including Commander Mark Reyna, who oversees the traffic group. So for those of us that look at the organization, and these two men are responsible for the oversight and leadership within our transit services, which involves all bus and rail operations, the security and safety of those, working in partnership and in contract with the MTA. And then Commander Reyna just recently took over this position. He was, as many know him, the commander that was in Operations Central Bureau, and now moving to Traffic Group, will be responsible for all of our traffic police officers, whether the motor officers, traffic investigators, as well as our collision investigators. So nearly 700 personnel of the organization, a department that commits, in my view, the largest number of police officers solely to pursue traffic safety in American policing. I'm not aware of any other agency that earmarks as much as we do, and I think meaningfully, as we'll talk later in the presentation about the issue of traffic safety in Los Angeles and how critical that is. As you indicated, we last week met under the leadership of Mayor Eric Garcetti for our annual year-end report on what successes, challenges, and opportunities that existed. We did produce a multi-page report that gave a historical perspective, not just a year-to-year change involving the major indices of crime in Los Angeles, but also a brief primer on various initiatives that we were pursuing. For those in the public that have not seen that, it's available on lapd.online. It can be downloaded and viewed on any handheld or computer device. We also can make those available for those who desire by reaching out to any of our area stations, and we'll ensure that they are provided that. The success that we saw in this last year, while I said there are many areas, we also saw challenges, but none of it would be possible without the support of this mayor, city council, and the police commission. Your support of the men and women LAPD and our initiatives speaks about the support of and the importance of public safety in Los Angeles to our elected officials. I also want to recognize that our success is also the direct result of our cops. Our cops count. Their work matters. The work they go out each day and making a difference in the lives in Los Angeles, I see as chief, and I'm proud of the work that they do. We don't always get it right. We make mistakes as every organizational unit does, but the vast majority of them each day goes out and dedicates their lives to improving not just crime numbers and statistics. We're going to talk a lot about statistics and fractions, and underneath all that is really lives, and really is what drives our men and women is their commitment to make a difference in people's lives and to lead a life of service. Before I go any further, though, I also, as I did last week, I want to bring a point of somberness in the sense of this description, because as we close 2019 with a second year in a row of year after year crime reductions, And we saw success in so many areas. We also lost 2 of our own in the line of duty, and these deaths of Officer Esme Ramirez and Officer Juan Diaz occurred over the course of them going out and doing that job I just described, and that loss of life of being the 210th and 11th officer who has died in the line of duty in Los Angeles is history. Reminds all of us of not just a solemn oath, but our real obligation to live up to the lives that they demonstrated in their service to the citizens of this city every day. In talking about crime statistics, some specific numbers. In 2019, we saw a 7% reduction in crime. This is the second year after year reduction. It occurred in both violent and property crimes. Those numbers work out to be 1,649 fewer victims of violent crimes and more than 7,400 fewer victims of property crimes. In our violent crime arena, we saw 253 homicides, which was a reduction of 7 fewer homicides and the second lowest number of homicides since 1962 per capita. And you have to go back to 1966 to find that actual number of that few of homicides. We had one other year where we had 251 a few years back, but this is a significant reduction, as well as seeing a reduction in 65 fewer victims experiencing gunshot wounds or shooting victims. That number was the lowest number of shooting victims in more than 21 years as an agency. And so where our success lied in that was our ability to reduce gang crime, and that effort, I believe, was a direct result of our engagement with Gang Reduction Youth Development Department. The director, Ms. Ann Tremblay, was at our press conference last week, and when people ask, why did you see reductions in violence this past year, it is not just the officers and their engagement, their building of trust and relationships with the community. It's also the community's engagement with Gang Reduction Youth Development outreach workers, with people who are in those neighborhoods and are quelling the gang violence and are stopping the back and forth that we in years past have seen escalate out of control. Additionally, with the efforts of gang crime reduction, we also saw an improvement in our ability to reduce crime by prevention. Our outreach with our communities, whether it be with additional volunteers, our neighborhood watch, our engagement through social media, I believe is improving the resiliency of our communities and their ability to harden the target, if you will. Additionally, last year was the latest segment of our efforts to put more officers on the field. I've been asked by this council in years past in a different position under the leadership of Chief Beck of how do we get more officers out in the field. And this was an initiative that began in 2015 and 2016, and an organization that looked seriously within its structure, recognizing the burden that we already placed on this city in regards to staffing, and identified that we could and would find ways of redesigning and directing officers to the field. A year ago, January, we moved that latest segment. That was nearly 200 officers back to the field. That resulted in by our own measure, 25,000 additional hours of officers working in a field capacity, in a black and white, and in a uniform out in the field. As we go back to 2016, we now have 1.3 million more hours of officers in the field today than we did just 4 short years ago. And I believe that that added resources to deal with added call load, to deal with added demands on police services, to allow us to engage communities and added trust building activities is allowing us to reduce crime, and in this partnership, this shared responsibility is showing these type of results. I also want to focus at our partnerships with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the federal agencies, in investing in the reduction of gun violence through the development of gun crime intelligence centers, both in South Los Angeles, and as we move forward, you'll hear more about our efforts to expand that shooting violence, while, again, the lowest in more than 21 years, is still too pervasive in a city of our size and a city of our success. And I believe that through partnerships and continuing to invest in this effort with our federal partners, both enforcement as well as the judiciary, that we can drive those numbers further down. Now, in talking about, so as we see success in as we see success in crime, both in violent and property, we see the reduction in gang crime. We see improvements when many people in the criminal justice system would expect it to be going the other way with the criticism of criminal justice reform. I believe that our men and women are showing the means in which to formulate good, successful strategies. What's critical is that when we talk about the public's trust and we talk about strategies, is that we also recognize the impact of traffic on Angelenos. Because while many, many people, I'll go to community meetings, are not impacted by violent crime or by property crime, nearly everyone is impacted by traffic or a traffic collision. This last year, and continuing the effort of our Vision Zero initiatives, led by Mayor Garcetti and supported by this council and in partnership with DOT, we saw the overall number of traffic collisions reduced. It was 700 fewer traffic collisions this year versus last, and 4 fewer fatalities, which continued a 3-year trend where we saw a high of 261 traffic fatalities in 2016. That number dropped to 239, I believe, in 2019. 243. So, but in looking at what makes up those deaths, what makes up serious injuries, while overall traffic collisions have been reduced, as have hit and runs, what we've seen increases in what I mentioned last week is in fatal collisions involving hit and runs and serious injuries, particularly in South Los Angeles. This last year, our fatal hit and runs collisions, which make up a very, very small percentage of all hit and run collisions, but a very costly. 62 individuals last year lost their life in relationship to a hit and run fatal. The majority of those were in South Los Angeles. In essential, there were not 25% in each of the 4 bureaus. The South Bureau cost more lives. We lost more people. And pedestrian safety and the pedestrian loss of life in those hit and runs is where we see increases over years past. So our effort going forward on traffic collision will be to bring attention to all of Los Angeles of the criticality of education. We see the pedestrian deaths that are occurring, we largely attribute to distracted driving, texting while driving, an operator motor vehicle and answer an email, peruse social media, but we also see that in pedestrian behavior. We see pedestrian behavior in the middle of the street, walking and not paying attention to their surroundings, assuming that they see movement left and right, and so they're moving as a herd, if you will, and not seeing an errant driver who's also not paying attention. Ultimately, the person who loses in that is the pedestrian. There is no match for being right and surviving a traffic collision. Being right will not indemnify you. So that awareness process is key to us, and I've asked our traffic resources as well as our area commanding officers to talk about this to ensure that people understand that as officers conduct pedestrian enforcement, for instance, that while they may not appreciate the stop, the detention, the warning, or even the citation, that our effort in traffic safety is to increase that awareness so we can build some resilience here. Additionally, we will look to the staffing levels within South Bureau Traffic to ensure that we have the sufficient number of detectives and follow-up investigators. Ultimately, we'll be determining that here within the next 60 to 90 days, but I do believe that the most critical component of South Los Angeles of improving this statistic is getting more community engagement, more community involvement, of reaching out and providing information to us. These are largely accidents that turn into crimes because a person flees. Many times, the investigation demonstrates that they're actually not at fault, that the pedestrian or other individual that was struck was at fault, but them fleeing the scene creates that, and of course it creates a huge amount of guilt and pressures on them from a humanistic standpoint of what has happened and their failure to take responsibility. So we want that awareness process, and we believe that that will help us solve and deter, but we also believe that it's necessary at this juncture to ensure that we have sufficient personnel there to follow up and investigate.
Chief, if I may just ask quickly, of the 62, how many of the individuals that committed the hit and run have been apprehended?
So we have the clearance rates for, go ahead. Yeah. So the overall total of solving hit and run fatals is 60%.
Oh.
But when you look at when we go to South Los Angeles, that number drops to 20 26%.
Okay.
So, and the imbalance here is that the highest number of hit and run fatals occur in the area of the city in which we solve the fewest numbers. And so that is by percentage. And so that's the imbalance that we need. And we need to make sure we have sufficient investigative resources. But in talking with our investigators, we also believe that community engagement, involvement, family members, friends, this is not being a snitch. This is bringing people to justice because the
right.
families and those who lose a loved one or a friend or associate to this type of an accident deserve, I believe, that type of closure. I want to move into a couple areas before I turn this over to you and certainly answer questions and concerns. In looking at a department such as ourselves and the complexity of it, crime fighting and traffic safety are important measures. They're important ambitions that we have. But in reality, any organization of our size is made up of so many different other aspects and initiatives. Training and accountability is one of those areas that in building trust, it's important that we lower crime, but it's also important that people have trust that our training and that our accountability systems are strong. This last year, we have continued our emphasis on procedural justice and constitutional policing, training that gives our basic recruit as well as our in-service officer the opportunity to understand what our expectations are, what our best practices are, and what it means to have positive and meaningful interactions with the public. This is not a department that arrests its way into solutions or out of problems. It's an effort that in each of our more than 1.8 million encounters last year is an opportunity for an officer to build trust and demonstrate, even in the most adverse circumstances, that they live by a set of core values. This last year, we also have continued to increase our accountability systems because it's one thing to train and to promote and to demonstrate a resolve that this is our standard of expectation. It's quite another to ensure that your accountability systems show the public, are transparent, and let them see that you're willing to make the hard decisions when we fall short of that. I'm proud of the work by the support of this council in allowing us to have body-worn videos, an $8 million a year investment that is paying huge dividends for our ability to understand accountability, for our ability to demonstrate the facts that is backed up not just by an officer's account or a person who was stopped, but by physical evidence, by video evidence. This past year, we increased the frequency of looking and using body-worn videos to understand the interactions. The vast majority of time, the officer's actions were found to be appropriate and to meet our standards. But when we found them fall short, in which we have in this past year, we also have been as transparent as possible to demonstrate our resolve to hold people accountable, and that those actions, when viewed, form the basis for us to take disciplinary action and to correct errant behavior. The aspect of earning that trust is something that, as we move into 2020, you have my commitment as a chief that we will lean into this and be our best critic, because we know this worked best, and I think that we also will take outsiders and people from the community and other sources to join into this analysis. But we're not shying away from the fact that this is our own house, and we need to make sure that we're acting in a manner that we expect. And again, I want to, just as we go down that road about accountability, is share with you that I am extremely confident that the men and women of the Justice Department by far go out each day and do a difficult job in trying circumstances, and I'm proud of the work that they do. And what that helps each of those persons would tell you if they were here is that also drives them to have no patience or temperament for individuals who don't live by those standards. And they're the first to not be apologetic or to not try to give safe refuge to someone who would not live by our standards. This past year, with my commitment as being the 57th chief, I committed to the mayor and this council with when my appointment was confirmed, that our effort is to lower the use of force, particularly the use of deadly force. And a year and a half later, I'm proud to say that we closed out 2019 with the lowest number of officer-involved shootings in more than 30 years. That the number of 26 was a reduction from the number of 33 the year before and 44 the year before that. That our efforts of training, our efforts of accountability, our efforts of added tools, I believe is demonstrating results, while at the same time allowing us to protect officers from deadly threats, to protect community members from individuals who would prey upon them, and officers are called to defend The balance that we have is building the confidence and maintaining the confidence of our people that the organization will back them as we ask them to do a difficult job. And I believe that the work under the leadership of Chief Arcos and field supervision and active supervision, as well as our training personnel under Chief Gramala, is setting the right tone and expectation, and I look forward to our continued success. Additionally, with my appointment, I discussed the importance of expanding our diversity, that we are an organization that in building trust, it's a matter of public safety by what defines that. Traffic safety, yes. Reduction of crime, yes. That officers, when they go and handle a call, that they'll be respectful, absolutely. That they are going to use force only when necessary and resort to deadly force only as a matter of saving their life or the life of an innocent bystander. But also as a matter of, does that individual who's delivering those services, are they reflective of the community in which that they're serving? And the particular area under the leadership of Police Commissioner Present Eileen Decker is our focus has gone to expanding the number of women that were within the organization, as well as our representation of African Americans and Asian Pacific Islanders. In this past year, we've reorganized our recruitment section. We've worked closely with our personnel department, Ms. Wendy Macy, to ensure that our employment practices are fair, that they don't establish boundaries that are having adverse impact on the communities in which I've just spoke about, and that when we hire people, we can hire them swiftly and have qualified individuals that can take a position on this department in a very tough job market. And so we're making progress in each of those areas. This past year, our African American recruitment numbers saw a 47% increase in the number of African Americans taking tests to become a member of this department. We have 84 of those applicants each week or each month. If people are listening to this, we're hiring, and we look forward to them stepping into that. This last year, nearly 13% of nearly 13% of Academy recruits were African American. In Asian Pacific Islanders, we saw an increase of 18% of Asian Pacific Islanders taking tests to become a member of this organization, with 11% of our Academy classes being made up of Asian Pacific Islanders. On women, we basically had a flat year in the sense that we had 143 women take a test each month to become a member of this department, but we did see 23% of our Academy made up of women. Our goal this last year, though, was 35. And our goal is to move to 50% of our Academy classes within my tenure. So this is an effort that's going to take a big pull. This has historically been an organization that has been a more male-dominant profession than women. And while this agency leads the country, and most agencies as far as the number of sworn women that are on the department, I believe that it takes that type of goal, if you will, to break the boundaries that's keeping us below 20% for about the last 10 years. I think we need to move, and we can, up to the 25% to 30% percentiles as our rank and file being made up of women. Certainly, you just have to leave police and fire services to find other city employment levels that better match the gender equality that we see in the communities in which we work and live. Our commitment to you is that we're going to continue that work. I do see and have promised expectations. The money that was provided to us by this council for this fiscal year for marketing amounts to $750,000. We will begin spending that on those targeted marketing efforts this month. Now, I know that this is the 7th month of a 12-month budget, but this is also an area that the department has not received funding year after year and has had to basically recreate a marketing strategy working with the personnel department. We've also been very careful working with the personnel department because about 6 months ago there was a very embarrassing set of circumstances in which an ad for the Los Angeles Police Department was on a website that was unnecessarily, that did not share the values, in my view, of what this organization promotes. And so we wanted to ensure that as we launched targeted efforts in targeted markets, that we're using a vehicle that would bring favor and bring approval and attract the right candidates to us as we expand. Lastly, I want to talk about technology. This was my appointment. We've had quite a bit of emphasis that this size of department, how do we maximize it? And we've reorganized to put as many people on the front in the field, working and handling calls, but also being available to work our community safety partnerships, building engagements at the neighborhood micro level. We opened South Park, for instance, this last year, and this coming year we'll be opening up the San Fernando Gardens Community Safety Partnership. And those take personnel in order to make effective building. But we also recognize that there's a technology gap where we are in a deficit after years and years of deferred maintenance, if you will. This last year, with the support of this council, $12 million was added to our budget to begin the first investment, if you will, of modernizing our technology. This past year, we, with your support, was able to outfit the entire organization with new handheld radios that were modernized, the radio system that improved communications. We replaced our entire communication system, the 911 dispatch system. So from the point of time in which a person picks up a call to call 911 until an officer handles that call in the field, that entire system was replaced. We also expanded our online reporting so that officers were not required to go out and take reports that had little investigative value, and community members weren't required to wait hours at a time for an officer to come to take a report that what they basically needed was something for their insurance purposes. So those technology investments, again, also, I think, helped us achieve the type of results that we saw. We also began this last year our work with the Police Foundation as a joint public-private partnership. I met with them, the board today, and thanked them for their generosity, for their continued engagement as they go to build a capital campaign that's going to be able to support this city. This city will always have the primary function of raising sufficient capital to modernize technology for all of its departments, and I think it's been a leader in that. But there's also, we recognize the expense of that and the burden that we already place on this city, and so we've asked if the foundation, if there's philanthropic community that would be willing to step into that. The foundation leadership has stepped into that wholeheartedly, and I look forward as we move forward into 2020 to begin seeing some of their projects. Projects such as Wi-Fi connectivity in all of our stations, something many of us take for granted, but is currently a void, if you will. So an officer's ability to have access to certain applications and certain connectivity is not something we have a present capability on. Our ability to modernize our communications in our black and whites so that officers can download and see data files and pictures and various other graphics that are necessary with the new modern communication system, but given the state of technology with our vehicle modems, is not possible today. These and other type initiatives is what we'll be investing in as we move forward in 2020 and as we, I believe, begin this next decade and see tremendous progress that is still to be made. So in summary, I'm proud of the work. I believe that we've had a very good year. We've had setbacks. We've certainly lost and experienced grief, but I do believe that our core values, in concert with the team that we have and the investment we're making for the future, promises a bright day for this city.
Thank you very much, Chief. And when we reflect on 150 years of this department and the progress that it makes, I look back even just 20 plus years and what inspired me and evoked my interest in public service from some of the things that I saw previously. We've made great gains, and I want to thank again the men and women of the department that recognize the privilege that comes with wearing that badge and the responsibility. It's an important one. It's one that we don't take lightly, and I know it's one that you all honor every single day. And so, we thank you for your service, and we're gonna continue to keep honing in on where we can make some marked improvements. I would be remiss if we didn't have the conversation about most recently what we've seen with the metropolitan officers that were involved with inaccurately marking individuals with gang affiliations. And so if you could provide an update on where we are with those investigations, where it may have netted additional officers that were involved, and just where we stand on that issue.
So for those that have not kept up with the recent reports or editions in the newspaper and so forth, just a brief framing of this. March of this last year in the Van Nuys area of the San Fernando Valley, Metropolitan Crime Suppression officers, these 3 officers. Metropolitan Crime Suppression are uniformed officers that work Metropolitan Division around the entire city. They, at the time, were added resources that we bring to areas experiencing increases in violent crime or other serious crime as added patrols, as a visible eyes and ears of going out and investigating and trying to identify those responsible for serious crime, particularly shooting violence. And their deployments in the areas was based on intelligence or information that we gathered from the local areas, and they had particular missions. And those missions largely involved vehicle stops and pedestrian stops of individuals that they believed or they suspected or they may be involved in those crimes, and just an awareness of what was going on in and about an area. So in March of this last year, an investigation came, personnel investigation began following the stop of an individual, a male Hispanic, a young man, in the Van Nuys area by 3 officers that were assigned to Metropolitan Crime Suppression. During the course of that stop, they filled out it's an investigative card. It's a small index card that lists the person's name, address, phone number, and various other attributes. If they drive a vehicle, if they're standing there with other people, the facts and circumstances of that stop. This investigative card is used for a variety of purposes. Community members may have had one filled out on them as a victim of a burglary, for instance. Officers will record that information so they can transfer it onto the report. Also, every arrestee of the organization has an FI filled out on them as, again, a process of filling out subsequent reports. We also interview people in the field for witnesses and a variety of reasons. So being on an FI card in and of itself is not a crime, doesn't mean you're involved in a crime, but it is a point of contact that we record. The expectation of officers is that any information they place on that card is accurate and that it's truthful. So these officers conducted this stop and they completed an FI on this young man, and that FI went for processing. In the processing of it, it was noted that on the FI was information relative to this individual that was detained and interviewed being a gang member. Pursuant to the establishment of what's called the California Gang Database, a statewide database controlled by the Office of the Attorney General, this database exists so that individuals we suspect to be gang members are cataloged or recorded there as an investigative tool for us to solve gang crime. Nearly 70% of shooting victims last year was committed by gang members or by gang involvement. So our ability to solve those crimes is in part our ability to identify people who are identified as being associated with gang crime or gang violence. So the idea here is that if you have a stop of an individual who's involved in gangs, or you have suspicion or believe they are, and they meet certain criteria, you place them in this database as an investigative tool for later, should there be a shooting or violence in that area, who might be related to that violence. In this instance, pursuant to the requirements of the database, we sent a letter to the mother of that young man because he was a minor. And that letter said, we believe, based on information that we have, that your son is a member of a gang, a street gang. If you disagree with that, notify us. So she did, and she came down to the Van Nuys station and she lodged a complaint that the information on there was not accurate. A sergeant supervisor interviewed her and then went back and looked at the investigation, looked at the stop information, and had the benefit of body-worn video to review. And a review of that body-worn video did not see evidence that was articulated or facts that were articulated on the card. So 2 things happened. One, he dismissed that individual or removed them from the California Gang Database, and told him that and gave the mother a correspondence to that effect. And secondly, initiated a personnel complaint because what was falsified on the card could not be explained, and not by any stretch. And so that began an investigation by our internal affairs. And our investigators found, we looked at that incident, and then we determined, and I directed that we look at other instances involving these 3 officers. And we found instances in which their actions appeared to be supported by body-worn video, but we also found some other inaccuracies that we couldn't explain. And so then we directed that not just those 3 officers stops, but that we would look to a second group of officers who worked with those 3 officers, and then we looked to officers who worked with the officers who worked with those officers. So 3 degrees, if you will. And the idea here is to determine, was this an isolated incident, or how pervasive was it? by Metropolitan officers who conduct these types of stops as a means of crime suppression. In addition to that, as this investigation has unfolded, it is a criminal investigation. So we have involved the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, because to falsify information on a police report is a criminal matter. It's not just an administrative or a policy issue. Secondly, is we began looking at some of the safeguards that were in place. Safeguards such as the letter to the parent worked. Safeguards such as, if you disagree with this, bring this to an attention of a supervisor and we'll launch an investigation, worked. Situations that you will not be placed in there if we agree with your assessment, worked. But what didn't work? Well, what didn't work was when the first person who got that FI from the officers entered the information into the CalGANGS database, they didn't challenge it on the basis of what did the body worn show, was there other evidence to support it. So we have changed those protocols. We now have that information reviewed by a lieutenant prior to that entry being made. We've also taken steps to ensure that if a person disagrees with being placed in the gang database, that now a bureau chief at a staff officer level is the final reviewer of that. Previously, it was an area captain. The idea here is to increase the accountability and to increase the assurances that the information we place in a CalGANGS is accurate. The other matters that we're doing is we've initiated ongoing inspections by gang units and Metropolitan Division of those type of encounters that we saw here, which was a stop of an individual with no enforcement, but a completion of an FI and a warning. And then the people went on their way. So this month, now each gang unit throughout the city and Metropolitan will have their supervisors conducting those random inspections to determine whether or not officers are meeting our high expectations. A similar effort was done a year ago of our gang units by our Inspector General and found well in excess of 90% of the instances the officers acted appropriately. The other 5 to 6% of the time, there was no misconduct in the sense of they didn't falsify information, but there was some shortfalls in the sense of how they performed in the field, manner in which they spoke, how they conducted themselves or conducted a search. And there was lessons to be learned from there. This past year, we've worked to establish this inspection process, and what I expect to find moving forward is, some assurance to the general public that this pervasiveness will be limited because we're going to be checking our work with greater scrutiny. Secondly, an affirmation of that will show our work in a sense of what we find, but also a warning to those that are engaged, should they be tempted to, for whatever reason, falsify this type of information, that they're going to be found, and that the consequences will be severe. As I sit here today, this investigation has resulted in evidence of which our officers have been found act consistent with the law and our high expectations, but also failures on the part of individuals that, in some instances, I've assigned them to home pending further information because I'm concerned about them exercising any powers of being a police officer, and an additional set of which I'm not clear what their involvement is. It may be minor or relatively low level, but rather than take a chance and have them in the field, I've assigned them to desk duties. That number totals 19 today. This investigation continues. We're working to, I've assigned 24 personnel to this as a means of working through this aggressively, but smartly to determine what happened here and also determine why it happened. The why it happened may take more time, and I don't know if we'll find why, but certainly I've challenged the command officers, not here at the table, but Chief Frank, Chief Sarconi, command officers within the Metropolitan Division, to understand what would motivate an individual to falsify the records that I now believe did occur in at least 2 instances that I've personally reviewed videotape on and seen from the body worn, and I will be moving forward on disciplinary action for the next step of holding accountable how that occurred. The commitment I make to this committee, as well as this council and the elected leadership, as well as every Angelino, is this is extremely troubling to us. It does not represent the high standards of the Los Angeles Police Department, does not represent the sacrifice and the dedication that led me into our conversation for today, and it will not stand. And yet, I also want the public to rest assured that while we'll take those actions, is that we also keep this in a perspective that there are failures and the system does work, and I'm committed to finding ways in which to strengthen that. And if and as I find circumstances that there's a cultural issue or something that allowed this for someone to believe that this would somehow be okay, is that we'll be swift in that regards as well.
Thank you so much for that. I think this underscores when we talk about efforts like CSP and all of our efforts to build on community policing and greater public trust. I appreciate the swift action and the review of the protocols and the process in reviewing how these individuals are identified so that we can in fact continue to, we're not ignoring it. We recognize that there was a problem, and I want to thank you for that and invite you to continue to provide us updates going forward as additional information becomes available. But colleagues, I do want to open it up for your questions as well. Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for this comprehensive report. I'm very pleased to see that almost in every category things are moving in the right direction in terms of the crime statistics. That's terrific. And I'm also very glad to see all of the cooperation amongst departments. You spent a lot of time in terms of traffic safety and hit and run, and you're working closely with the Department of Transportation. I know there's a focus on the high injury networks. I know that on Temple, for example, we're installing on a major thoroughfare what is essentially a speed hump. It's called a speed table. It's just longer, but it's very visible, and cars and buses are forced to slow down where these speed tables are. So I'm hopeful that these innovative approaches to traffic calming measures will also go a long ways in helping slow traffic down so that minimize the severity of injuries once an accident occurs. In terms of the presentation on the falsifying of the records, just a comment, not even a question, but it'll be interesting to see as you report and keep the investigation going, how you'll determine if someone actively falsified a record or simply documented a false impression. I think that's going to be really tricky from what I hear you explain in terms of the report that gets filed. And I can see that that's going to take a lot of time, and you'll have to establish a very, very believable standard, I think, on that one. It'll just be interesting to
Our commitment is to be fair.
Yeah.
I've committed that each officer deserves a due process as everyone else does, and if there are instances in which an officer's account and evidence that's available has ambiguity, has uncertainty, that's part of our responsibility is to clear up those ambiguities. There may be system changes or other things that we can do to clarify, but I'm starting with the deepest wound, if you will, to public trust, is that I believe that some of these allegations are true. And now, as we identify those that have lesser levels and may be ambiguity, may be a matter of interpretation, a false impression, I'm willing and will not rush to judgment and take it all as the same.
It's serious stuff. I mean, the career of the individual in question is at risk, and then the reputation of the entire department gets called into question as well. So it's really a serious situation here, and perhaps it'll result in some sort of systematic resolution or change. Or
we've already recommended prior to earlier this year in 2019, the Attorney General of the State of California had sought input from law enforcement agencies as well as civil rights advocates and others to what improvements could the California Gang Database System have. And in this past August, I submitted a multi-page series of recommendations that would help improve ambiguities, help improve uncertainties, questions or criticisms of the system, of how it may bring individuals into its membership that are not, may not be gang members or gang associates. We're acting on those recommendations. I'm proud to say that so is Attorney General. His office's initial review of those is to adopt nearly all of them, and our work will continue with him. We're one of the largest users of that database. It's important that we use it for its intended purposes, that it not be garbage in, that it serve its intended purpose.
And in terms of the diverse talent pool that you are seeking for the LAPD, you mentioned women and African American underrepresentation, and you also mentioned targeted marketing for recruitment purposes. Can you elaborate on that? Are you working with local nonprofits as well as actual marketers?
Presently, it's actual marketers that are on city contract, that are members and or seeking to become members of the city family in the sense of its outreach and engagement. Marketing is, as you are well aware, is a craft that involves sophistication and understanding of modern technologies, of audiences and the varying demographics. As I've been reminded by my daughter, Facebook is for grandparents. It's not for it's not for the younger amongst us. So how we go about and define it is not, as a chief of police and as Ms. Macy would indicate, I'm sure as others, we need to look to our experts of, as we want to reach and desire to reach these targeted demographics, how do we best present the department and the fact that we're hiring, that it's a tremendous opportunity, and perhaps shift interest away from other competing fields for these qualified individuals into this field.
And are you also looking at our targeted local hiring program in the city? And then we work with a lot of nonprofits. For example, I've come across many young people in the Conservation Corps who, in many instances, have disadvantaged backgrounds, but are very interested in becoming a first responder, police or fire. I think that is something that you could perhaps look into as well, our Conservation Corps.
Good point, and I will ask our people to explore that. I also want to remind people through all of our communities that the process of how you become a member of this department has taken too long. My commitment is for us to shorten it to applicant to hire date of 90 days. I'm proud of the work in the Personnel Department and LAPD. We have shortened it to under 200 days today. That used to be a 1 to 2 year period of processing time. But our idea is that we would be much more competitive in today's world if we can hire individuals who are qualified in a more streamlined fashion. Secondly, is that the standards be fair. An individual who may be in a conservation corps or in an at-risk home or had a challenging upbringing, that they, because of a zip code, they should have no different background standard than anyone else, and that their standards of being a Los Angeles police officer recognize that people make mistakes, that they can have difficult childhoods and they can have difficult associations. What I'm looking for is a person who has good emotional intelligence, who has good core values, who's demonstrated their ability to be responsible and to take on added responsibilities. And so if people believe that this was an agency that they tried years ago and could not get into because of out-of-date standards, I would tell you candidly that in the last 5 years, I think the department and the city has improved its standards to be more reflective of 2019, 2020, but I also believe that we have more work to do in that area.
The lived experience standard is becoming more and more important in any field, and I would imagine it's the same for law enforcement. And lastly, Madam Chair, you didn't mention two other distinct groups, Latinos and the LGBT community. How are the numbers looking there, and does stepped-up recruitment need to happen with those two demographics?
Well, we will hire and look to every group, and areas, certainly our Latino, Hispanic representation now is quickly approaching 50%. I think we're 49% of the organization's makeup. The demographics matching, actually exceeding the representation in our communities. LGBTQ, I'm proud to say that we have members in each of those communities. And I believe that our outreach engagement through our community building with our forums, with our efforts with safe places, our engagement through pride parades and other efforts demonstrates that we're hiring. I participated the last several years in the parade, and we walk, and we have people from our organization who volunteer to walk, who are members of the LGBTQ, and who are also just members of the organization. They don't come with a qualifier or an identifier. So I do think we're doing well there. Certainly, I will not say that we are. I do believe that there's challenges with LGBTQ community and employment, and those challenges we will go after in each instance in which we find discrimination or anyone that would believe that there's not a place in this organization for a member of one of those communities.
Do you have a percentage of those who self-identify as LGBT, and has that needle moved?
I do not know if we have an actual stated percentage. I will say that it is an area in which we want to be inclusive, and we have not specifically identified gender, non-binary, or a membership of those particular communities. We do have employee groups that have active membership within those, and I'm aware of some individual instances in which in the migration over this is my 39th year. This was not the scenario of a chief of police sitting here 30 years ago. It is an area today that it's 20 years ago we made efforts to be able to deal. How do we accommodate and work and ensure an inclusion with transgender, for instance? And today it's part and parcel of what we do, just based on an individual asking for those.
Chief, I think the LAPD does an amazing job in the LGBT community. It'd just be interesting to get some data.
Okay.
And since we're more and more data
Let me see what we can do.
that could be very helpful.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Great work.
Thank you. Mr. Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Chief, for the amazing for the very in-depth presentation. Just a few questions. Regarding traffic collisions, hit and run collisions. You went really in depth in it, and we are down 11%, which is very great. But a greater number of these crashes end with fatalities. So clearly, we're doing something right with Vision Zero and everything else. But the fact that it ends in fatalities, is it just speed, just what we already know, or have you seen in your statistics something else that attributes this to the actual increase in fatality?
It's pedestrians. The impact between a motor vehicle, moving conveyance, striking an unarmored individual is where these fatalities are increasing. And those fatalities, generally just over half of the fatalities, the pedestrian is actually at fault, whether it be distracted or not paying attention to surroundings, or believing that people see them, or being in unlit crosswalks, or in outside of crosswalks where the motoring public may not be expecting them. The perfect combination here is you don't have to drive but a mile around this downtown corridor, and you'll see people walking. It's a very active walking environment with earbuds in both ears, paying attention to their phone as they're walking in like a general direction, and they think there's this cone of safety around them. And out of 100,000 of those cycles, we lose somebody to a fatality because of right turn or because of electric vehicle. They're not paying attention. Their sensories are been impacted because they're not defensive walking. Same with defensive driving. Defensive driving needs to anticipate people who aren't paying attention as pedestrians. And so they conduct themselves in a manner of driving and pay attention to the roadway so that they can stop these accidents from occurring. As we think about the motoring miles and how many vehicles are in Los Angeles and the millions of miles that are completed, these people could say, well, 243 homicides are fatals. That's your 9 or 10 decimal points over to of a percentile. But we do know that we can achieve greater results by just taking care of some of these top shelf issues, which is paying attention to the roadway and paying attention to our surroundings.
Yeah, and it's the usual. I know we have lots of campaigns, but trying to legislate for behavioral modification is the hardest thing. And I like how you went very in depth, and you even dissected the fact that even with traffic fatalities, even though it's low, it's very high in South LA or in the lower income areas. Are there, regarding the overall statistics that you gave us, and it's great that the crime statistics are down overall, but are there any other statistical points or any other locations or areas where you're seeing increases in crime? Like you said about the traffic fatalities when it comes to pedestrians, or is it all uniform?
No, nothing's all uniform. You have a presentation later this morning, or later this afternoon, maybe, on hate crime that is up yet again this year. It is an overall basket of crime. It's a very small series of numbers, but has a tremendous disproportionate impact on a community's sense of safety. Anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ. There are a number of hate trends that are there that we're seeing both in incidences as well as crime. For instance, the incidence of hate crimes, the numbers within some of the communities have remained flat, but the seriousness of the event has moved from property crimes such as vandalism into actual violence. Secondly is homelessness. The instances of crime involving people experiencing homelessness is up this year versus last year. If you're to look at the bucket of work, if you will, out of 3% of victims of all crimes are homeless, are identified as being homeless this year. 5% of all suspects identified as being involved in a Part 1 crime, which is a violent or serious property crime, is identified as being a person experiencing homelessness. So while a small percentage of the overall market of drivers, if we look at, for instance, in violent crime, I recall 69% of all shooting victims are gang-related. We do see this year versus the year before an increase in the level of violence and the number of crimes associated with people experiencing homelessness. And that increase we attribute to an increase in the size of the homeless population and violence being within the community itself. People experiencing homelessness, experiencing aggravated assaults, robberies, sexual assaults, even homicides, primarily preying upon others who are also experiencing homelessness. I'm proud of the work this year and our work both in outreach and engagement and supporting the partners in city government and county government to try to find resources for people experiencing homelessness, housing, hygiene, shelter. But I'm also proud of our men and women who are identifying those people responsible for the underlying crimes I've just spoke about. Crimes involving homelessness, suspects that we've identified and arrested increased 23% this year versus last, and the increases were for crimes of violence that we believe those individuals committed, as well as in serious narcotic offenses such as the sale and trafficking of drugs. So I believe that we're striking the right balance of understanding that this is a very at-risk population, and a population within our city that we're experiencing, I believe, the greatest humanitarian crisis of our generation. And I believe that the work of the city and the county, and certainly the federal government needs to increase in its velocity. But in the interim, as our men and women are going out and struggling like much of the rest of us are, and how to deal with this phenomenon before us, I do believe that they are focusing appropriately on those people who are committing crimes of violence, committing and preying upon communities in which they may reside, and bringing them to the criminal justice system, and simultaneously supporting a manner of other outreach and care providers who can hopefully transition and form a relationship that allows people to transition out of this state of homelessness. And I'll close by saying, as we move forward into 2020, our commitment is to stay focused on those individuals who are committing crime, such as robberies and aggravated assaults and burglaries, thefts, larcenies, that are homeless, to identify their involvement and to bring them to the criminal justice system, as we do everyone within this city. Being homeless is not a purpose to go out and arrest an individual, but it's also not an alibi to say, well, this is not a crime of violence or a crime where they're preying upon a community that we're going to allow to occur. Secondly, I am proud of the work of the Office of Operations in 2019 that you'll see more of in 2020, in which communities that have experienced encampments and shelter, make to shelters, if you will, have also seen instances of narcotic sales and distribution, and that they would say, if you will, point out the pink tent, you can buy methamphetamines. The blue tent is a person slinging cocaine or heroin. And our narcotic enforcement details are working effectively with our area units to identify those people who are transporting and selling and narcotics, and our arrests for those type of offenses for narcotic use are also up. And I think those two attributes can help the public understand that the department is doing everything it can in enforcing the law for those type of offenses, while at the same time trying to provide as much as a supportive environment that allows other providers to come in and provide effective resources to transition people out. Lastly, your support of bridge housing and our ability to provide added services around those bridge housing, I believe, has allowed that strategy as a city strategy to continue to grow. And I look forward for your continued support to allow us to do those augmented services by assigning overtime resources or added resources, not from existing deployments, but to at least get good starts of those locations in communities so that they can become a reasonable neighbor and not be seen as something, as a resource bringing down a neighborhood safety.
You know, on that note, when it comes to an encampment and there's drug sales going on, is it the actual homeless person, or is it usually, and I know homeless people might be involved, but it was my understanding that it's usually like a gang element or someone else who infiltrates the homeless encampment, and out of either fear or intimidation or some other means is using them as a front.
That's true. It's the latter. I mean, we have, for lack of a better term, there are people who are marshaled in the sense of who are experiencing homelessness. They have a narcotic or drug dependency, and they get their fix, if you will, by selling narcotics on behalf of someone else. The people who we're targeting may be that person selling those narcotics in that very same tent. But we really know the long game is identifying how those narcotics are reaching that tent, and how the criminal element. We also believe organized street gangs are profiting on the misery and the violence that they're committing by the open air drug sales that we have in some of these areas.
So it's like a new version of a drug house, right?
It is.
Instead of a house, it's a drug tent now.
It is.
And you know, when you're talking about the homeless crime, have you actually drilled down? I'm wondering if you have the statistic where how much of the crime is actually where homeless individuals are victims of crime versus homeless individuals perpetrating the crime. Do you have that breakdown?
Yeah. So 3% of victims identified in crime as victims, so 3%, 3 out of 100 are experiencing homelessness. Now, the majority of that is they're experiencing violent crime. The same for the suspects. The suspects that we identified are primarily, it's 5% of the total world of suspects by number, by percentage, and primarily we're identifying them as committing violent crime. The interaction is homelessness on top of on homelessness. Right. For instance, in the number of homicides this year, homicides involving people who we have identified as experiencing homelessness increased. And when we look at who's committing those homicides, we find that in all of but 3 instances, they involved other individuals experiencing homelessness, or they involved a narcotic transaction or some type of other risky, at-risk behavior where it got into a narcotic dispute and a homeless individual died. But it wasn't as a result of somebody preying upon the homeless community, of some individual that just was trying to take retribution. And that same goes for the violence that's committed.
So basically, 3% of victims are self-identified as homeless, right? 3% of the victims,
3.
Right, 03. Yeah. And quite realistically, a lot of homeless individuals are probably not even reporting to begin with.
Yes.
And then, of course, and then you said 5% of those committing the crime are identified as homeless. But from that 5%, most of them are committing crimes against other homeless individuals.
Yes, and again, when you recognize that many of our property crimes do not have described suspects. Right. You have a larceny or burglary. We don't know who stolen vehicle. So of identified individuals, 5%, once we find that individual, we determine are experiencing homelessness.
So what I'm trying to get at is, there's a lot of fear with homeless individuals, people experiencing homelessness, but that, and as seen in study after study and in city after study in states, most homeless people are actually victims. They're not actually the victimizers. They're not really. There hasn't been a spike in crime of homeless people attacking residents.
Well, Mr. Root, can we need to, 'cause
Okay,
we
sorry
have,
about that.
we have
yeah.
some other.
So I'll do a deeper dive with you guys separately.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Chief, I just want to first put a little plug in for the captains in my area. In 4 months that I've been there, their willingness to work with my office and to help me, understand their job and to, what they do, and I really appreciate that. And I think I heard you say it as far as I'm very proud of what we do as far as with our Hope team, and we now have this care team. I tend to disagree with some people in this building as far as the police officer's presence. I believe our police officer presence at some of these things where we have a Hope team that goes out 3 or 4 times during a week actually know these individuals, and more importantly, keep situations from escalating to a point. And if I heard you right, I believe that how you feel about having officers, as part of those, sanitation cleanups and being present, because I don't necessarily see the fear that the officers are bringing. I think it as a positive thing.
I read today's paper as well. I mean, I understand today or yesterday's paper that talked about the efforts of ensuring that sanitation services are out and are enforcing very needed enforcement in regards to bulky item pickups and clearing up debris and the concern for their safety. That is our concern as well. And our deployments, as the mayor's office and the mayor has supported the expansion of sanitation services and Care and Care Plus, was to ensure that those workers, as he launched that program, the latest initiative expanding services for sanitation, that they would be safe. And LASA's efforts of going out and being outreach workers with that group as well, I value that as their ability to engage and perhaps convince the individual through that engagement that there's alternatives and that we need to promote that. Our presence, I just don't want to have impacted by our inability to staff all of those teams with a physical presence, meaning that 2 officers for every team or 10 officers for every team is going to be, if you will, it's a poison pill to our ability to support all the teams. And if that's a requirement, it's going to require those teams to be smaller teams. What we have found through the good training and, frankly, very good people working sanitation and the nature of the public in which they're working with and experiencing homelessness is, by and large, we're not needed. But when we are, that we are there. And so those instances in which we see sites in which, because of past encounters, we believe there may be efforts to intimidate city staff or jeopardize their safety or resistance, we certainly are there now. It is less than 10% of the time, I'll say. Most of these cleanups and processes are going remarkably well with no pushback. But we stand ready. Each day, Chief Arcos ensures a deployment of dedicated personnel in a regional basis around the city to support those teams. Some of those teams have those resources there with them the entire shift because of the nature of the sites that they visit. Other instances, we are a radio call away. These resources that the care teams have, they have our actual radio frequencies, and we have a priority basis in which we will give them, we will be present for them. So I think it's both. I think that we are an added component and a needed component for safety. What I ask is that as the teams, as this city effort goes about, that the police department has input as to how to use our finite resources and the precious balance of putting police officers in the right place with the maximum use of their limited capacity. So
interesting.
So I think for instance, in Lau Close, your office is probably a perfect. Every office is a perfect example. As your teams work with those teams, and you see problematic sites in which sanitation feels that they're intimidated or they can't take action, we want to be present there to ensure that the law can be enforced as it should be. What we want to avoid is those finite resources that sanitation has going to a site and choosing not to take items that should be seized because of a fear for the workers' safety. Those are sites those are priority one on our list to ensure that their work that they're set out to do can be accomplished. Because I think there is frustration in communities that believe that they see those resources deployed and then they don't see a change or they don't see a consequence with those resources.
You know, a little over 10 years ago when the economy took a downturn, we made the decision to eliminate a lot of civilian positions within the LAPD, which in turn just pulled officers off the streets and back into stations. I mean, since that time, have we made any progress in hiring back those civilian positions so we can actually get the officers back out on the streets?
So in 2008, your recollection as well, we're at 3,600 full-time equivalents. We fell below 2,700 civilian personnel at the low point, which is in 2015. I'm proud of the work of this, your predecessor, as well as your interest in this, as well as this full council and the mayor's initiative, which was to begin to rebuild, if you will, all of city government's civilian ranks by 5,000 personnel. We have grown from just under 2,700 to just at 3,000. Those 300 positions have been critical in our ability to restore critical back office services like jail services. We'll be opening the Harbor Jail, for instance, in the current investment by this council in this current fiscal year in February. That facility was shut down in 2010, 2 months after it opened, because of the shortage of civilian personnel. We have, and I'll close, more room. The budget coming to you is asking for further civilianization. I believe that the department could move as many as 400 additional personnel, sworn personnel, into field assignments if we were to continue to restore the 600 civilian positions that we still have open because of the worst economic downturn in generations.
And, you know, one of the biggest, I know this is a big goal of yours, and just curious at how the progress has been. You know, I'm a big believer that, you know, my district is as safe as it is because of the volunteers that we have in Devonshire Division and the number of people that actually, and the number of groups. And I know that's a goal of yours, and wondering just about the progress about the volunteers through the other stations.
So we have, you're right, Devonshire Volunteers really began the program 20 years ago, and the last year we've added 275 registered city volunteers to our ranks of city volunteers working within the police department around the city. So I look for that number to be 5,000. I believe a city of 4 million can bring that type of volunteer service. And if people are listening, each of our 21 areas have opportunities, whether it's a front desk, it's answering phones, it's calling back victims, citizen patrols, which your office and other offices have supported generously with polo shirts, and we provide good training. Those, I think, again, those are part of a safer community.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, Keith.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Thank you for your work. And again, we invite you back
Absolutely.
as often and as you are available to continue to provide us updates. But thank you for your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My apologies, I neglected to call item 4. We're going to continue item 4, so if anyone was here for item 4. And item 7, I know we have a technical correction. If we want to go ahead and call that item 7. Yeah, good.
Item number 7, CAO and Board of Police Commissioners reports relative to the acceptance of the fiscal year 2019 mental health training grant.
Madam Chair. Tyler Munhall with the CAO. It's just one instruction was inadvertently omitted from this report, and I've been asked to read this into the record, so I'll go ahead.
Go ahead.
Number 4, authorize the city clerk to place the following action relative to the California Board of State and Community Corrections 2019 Mental Health Training Grant on the City Council agenda on July 1, 2020, or the first meeting day thereafter. Authorize the controller to transfer appropriation within Department 70 fund number to be determined to the general fund as follows, subject to the approval of the mayor. From fund account to be determined, account title California Board of State and Community Corrections 2019 Mental Health Training Grant, amount $38,699. To fund 100 Department 70 account 001090, overtime general, $34,803. Fund 100, Department 70, account 001092, overtime sworn, $3,896 for a total of $38,699. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, I'd like to go ahead and recommend we approve the recommendations as amended. And seeing no objections, that'll be the order. Thank you very much. That'll bring us to item number 8.
Item 8, CAO and Board of Police Commissioners reports relative to the acceptance of a grant award of $710,000 for the fiscal year 2019 body-worn camera policy and implementation program.
Hello again.
Tyler Runhall, CAO. This report essentially authorizes the department to accept a grant for $710,000 to buy body-worn cameras for the officers that deploy to the MTA. I think there's an issue about putting the costs of the cameras into the cost allocation plan and kind of why we're recommending that.
Correct.
Okay. The cost allocation plan is a mechanism by which the city recognizes the cost of indirect expenses, employee benefits, the cost of radios, the cost of the city attorney to advise, and in this case, the cost of equipment, not only the equipment, but the cellular data plans and the subscriptions to upload data, body-worn camera data to the cloud. Those are going to be, just for the MTA portion, over time, $1.4 million annually. The total program right now is $12 million. So by adding those expenses to the cost allocation plan, when an outside entity, such as MTA or USC or the Dodgers, utilizes our officers, we can get a prorated, we can charge them a prorated amount for those costs.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That actually helps because I was like, how do we recover that? And so that answers my question.
Okay.
Colleagues, any additional? Okay. So thank you very much. Then we'll go ahead and I'd like to recommend approval of the CAO's recommendation. Without objection, that'll be the order. And that now brings us to item number 15.
Item 15, Board of Police Commissioners report relative to additional recommendations on reported hate crimes and religious, ethnic, or racially motivated violence.
Mr. Rue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as our Chief Moore alluded to, many of you know that I've been deeply concerned by a documented increase in hate crimes and how to best address it. Though other crimes are going down, and we have LAPD coming up, thank you so very much. Though other crimes are going down, as we saw in the previous presentation, we are seeing hate crimes go up. Los Angeles is no exception to this trend, and we are seeing more and more attacks on synagogues, African Americans, the LGBTQ community, and so many other marginalized groups. And today, unfortunately, I understand that the number has increased yet again to 322 reported hate crimes in 2018. That is more than 10% over last year and more than 40% since 2016. This is unacceptable, and it is clear that we must do more. Year after year, we have seen hate rising in our city and across our nation, and we have not done enough to keep communities safe. LAPD is doing an incredible job with the limited resources available, but it's important that the funding matches the urgency of these times. We, as the city, need to take these numbers seriously because behind every one of these numbers is a religious minority, a person of color, a transgender or LGBTQ person suffering in fear. This is not what Los Angeles should be about. We should be increasing our funding and protection for vulnerable communities and be proactive about hate crime prevention. If we don't stand up for these communities, who will. I want to note in particular that Jewish Angelenos faced the highest number of hate crimes in 2018. And according to the Anti-Defamation League, 2018 was the third highest year of anti-Jewish hate crimes since the 1970s. All hate crimes must be taken seriously, but a national outbreak of anti-Semitism to a level that we have not seen since World War II should concern and scare us all. We must be proactive in preventing all hate crimes. We must seek security improvements for vulnerable institutions and increase information sharing between the city and the marginalized groups. As this report has highlighted, and many of us already know, there is a disturbingly limited amount of funding available for vulnerable institutions seeking security enhancements, and this must change. My office created a security fund for institutions within my district to apply for security upgrades, staff trainings, and more. It isn't much, but it's a start. We have to do more to ensure that these institutions have access to funds, information, and assistance so that they can do everything within their power to protect themselves and their community members. If history is a guide, it shows us that we have a choice. We can submit to fear and division, we can resign ourselves to cynicism, or we can all stand together, fight for our common humanity, and make Los Angeles a national leader in hate crime prevention. And with that, I have a few questions. Well, first off, before I do my questions, can you walk us through the report?
Sure. First, let me introduce my team. Commander Ann Clark, Detective Services Group. To my right, Captain Jonathan Tippett, Commanding Officer, Robbery Homicide Division. And to his right, Detective Orlando Martinez, who is the department's hate crime coordinator. So I will turn it over to Captain Tippett.
We'll start off by informing you that RHD is responsible for hate crime statistics, classifying hate crimes correctly, ensuring the FBI is notified of all hate crimes. Occasionally, RHD will handle certain hate crimes involving a series, multiple divisions, or investigation that is very complex. Otherwise, the areas of occurrence will take the investigative lead. Quarterly training for area hate crime coordinators is also something that RHD handles, and updating the LAPD policy on dealing with hate crimes. Major Crimes Division is also involved, and they are responsible for investigating a general threat or specific crime of hate directed at a church or place of worship. As for statistical information for the City of LA, we have the following statistical data for 2019 and 2018. And Councilman, as you pointed out, and also Chief Moore mentioned earlier, our hate crimes are up. We have 322 for this year versus 292 last year, which is a 10% increase. Anti-transgender, we have 21 versus 17, which is a 23% increase. Anti-race and ethnicity, 153 versus 152, which is pretty much on par with what we had last year. Anti-black, 68 versus 61, which is an 11.5% increase. Anti-Hispanic, 42 versus 44, 4.5% decrease. Anti-Arab, 3 versus 7, which is a 57% decrease. Anti-white, 12 versus 15, which is a 20% decrease. Anti-religion, 81 versus 52, which is a 56% increase. Anti-Islamic is 5 versus 2, which is a 150% increase. Anti-Jewish, 69 versus 43, and we have a 60.5% increase. However, I think it's important to note that that number also includes all swastika vandalisms, which wasn't included in that category before. So you take away those 25 cases and it becomes 44, which is very much on par with what we had last year at 43. Anti-sexual orientation, 65 versus 71, which is an 8.5% decrease. Anti-female gay, 12 versus 6, which is a 100% increase. Anti-male gay, 53 versus 56, which is a 5.4% decrease. School-related hate crimes is 18 versus 15, which is a 20% increase. At the request of Councilman Ryu and his staff, we have addressed some of the questions as it pertains to hate crimes and investigations. What is the current protocol for notifying religious, ethnic, or cultural institutions about potential immediate threat to their facility? When a credible threat is discovered, LAPD Threat Management Division, Robbery Homicide Division, and/or Major Crimes Divisions notify the location in person and offer a security vulnerability assessment through the Joint Regional Intelligence Center. As detectives investigate the threat, detectives, area command staff, and senior lead officers meet with the institutions to formulate a protection plan, and area divisional officers are directed to conduct extra patrols as needed at the location. How are you currently relaying hate crime information to the public? LAPD Hate Crimes Unit, area stations, and division senior lead officers have created social media accounts on the different types of platforms available. LAPD uses these accounts to provide crime updates, crime statistics, community alerts, and crime alerts to the public. LAPD Media Relations is also responsible for disseminating crime information to the public that investigating detectives have deemed appropriate. LAPD Hate Crimes Unit attends department functions, community meetings, and religious forums to update the public on the LAPD's efforts to address hate crimes. LAPD Hate Crimes Unit also posts quarterly hate crime information to the public via social media. LAPD has also committed to transparency by posting all crime information on the City of Los Angeles open data website. The LAPD has created modus operandi MO codes for every protected characteristic so residents, journalists, interested parties can search for real-time hate crime data throughout the city of their respective neighborhood at any time. The report says the current hate crime pamphlet is only available in English and Spanish. Is it possible to make this available in other languages like French, Persian, Hebrew, and Arabic? LAPD will consult with certified language officers and create new LAPD forms in those and other languages. Copies will be made available via the Department Land System under LAPD forms so officers can print out what they need during their initial investigations. So that is something that we can enhance. Can you talk to us about the training that LAPD officers participate in? How are they training to provide security enhancements? The Joint Regional Intelligence Center has 2 officers that conduct a Train the Trainer 4-hour security grant vulnerability assessment training. This training not only instructs officers on how to provide a basic rudimentary security evaluation, but also provides support to 501(c) nonprofit organizations applying for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, California Office of Emergency Services Nonprofit Security Grant Program. The SGP is estimated to be open for application between March and May of 2020. Officers attending the course are instructed in identifying common vulnerabilities for houses of faith and mitigating options for those locations by taking a step-by-step look from the exterior perimeter to the location interior using the Cal OES Vulnerability Assessment Worksheet. Some examples of common vulnerabilities are low fences, lack of security cameras available to monitor off-site, motion sensor lights, lack of burglar alarms connected to off-site service, keeping money at locations, and money deposit procedures. Participants are all instructed in how to assist qualifying 501(c) nonprofit organizations correctly, complete the FEMA Cal OEG forms when applying for the available grants. The vulnerability assessments do not cover and or train the City of Los Angeles Run and Hide, Fight, or the Los Angeles Unified School District Run, Hide, Relocate tactics, but participants are made aware of the LAPD Run, Hide, Fight, Train the Trainer program currently run out of Operations Valley Bureau, which is available to community members, government installations, and private business. The JRIC has 2 upcoming security grant vulnerability training sessions in February of 2020. Additional LAPD senior lead officers from various divisions will be attending both classes. What is the status of the website that you're creating for victims assistance? LAPD Community Engagement Group and Robbery Homicide Division are coordinating with the LAPD webmaster and creating new pages and hyperlinks to advise the community about the numerous resources available through service providers for victims of crime. The LAPD Hate Crimes pamphlet and the LAPD LGBTQ Safety Resource pamphlet have limited amounts of space, and service providers and victim advocacy groups are constantly changing, which is problematic with printed materials. It is our belief that an easily accessible website with links to contact information for various governmental agencies, advocacy groups, and nonprofits that cater to different cultures, religious, sexual orientations, etc., will assist the community in finding the specific options needed for each individual victim. This will also be cost-effective as updating websites can easily be completed. Unlike printed material, which must be ordered in bulk and should, in any contact information change or need to be removed, the remaining materials must be destroyed and cannot be used. The LAPDonline.org website will be updated during the 2020 calendar year. These are just some of the responses. I believe we are encouraging people to report. We are making a better effort to investigate and deal with these crimes and deal with the needs of the city of Los Angeles.
Well, thank you so very much for your in-depth presentation and preemptively answering pretty much most of my questions. Thank you for that. Just to follow up, so you did say that the department is possible when it comes to hate crimes pamphlet or other information that's currently available in English and Spanish that you can expand to other languages like French, Persian, Hebrew, and Arabic?
Yes.
So is there a cost associated with that? Is that something you guys could absorb or that you can do, or?
There will be a cost associated with that because printing pamphlets is there's always a cost associated with that, but we will search out people that speak those languages to make that happen.
Great. One other question. Two questions actually. Chief Moore alluded to the fact that while a lot of crimes have gone down, the crime overall, the severity has actually increased of the actual crime. When it comes to hate crime, have you seen any trend in that as well? Even though hate crime has gone up, is it more severe hate crimes or is it just lesser type hate crimes? Not that you could measure. Is there more violence or is it more like graffiti?
So I would say over the last year, it is not as violent as it was the year prior. We had some significant arrests and investigations that occurred approximately 2 years ago. So I would say that it is actually, in terms of the violence, it is not increased.
Okay. And this is a kind of some of a difficult question to answer, but while the general crime is going down, but hate crimes is going up, do you have any professional opinion on why we're seeing this? And obviously it's not just LA, this is happening nationally, but if there is an LA focus or your professional opinion on why these hate crimes are going up.
Okay, so I believe that, in my opinion, I think we're reaching out to these communities and we're making a great effort to make sure that they know that we're working in partnership with them. And I think it's our showing of compassion, our care, that we actually want to investigate these crimes that's caused people to come forward and to report these crimes more frequently, is what I believe.
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, I have some recommendations, but if you have any questions?
No, you can go ahead and...
Great. Madam Chair, thank you so very much. But the recommendations I have then is to instruct the LAPD to work with the Office of the Chief Legislative Analyst to compile a list of organizations that is geographically and demographically comprehensive that the LAPD can place on the Victims Assistance website as resources for victims of hate crime. Second, I'd like to instruct the LAPD to adapt the hate crime section of the department's website to include appropriate contact information for LAPD security assessments, something you guys already do. And third, report on the feasibility of developing a citywide communication tool operationally similar to the Jewish Federation's Community Security Initiative to serve as a single point of contact for critical incident coordination and information sharing to serve as a conduit for proactive hate crime prevention. And the fourth, to obviously expand on the hate crimes pamphlet to be available in other languages such as French, Persian, Hebrew, and Arabic.
Thank you, Councilor.
Great. So without objection, that'll be the order. Thank you very much for hanging with us. Appreciate it. And I believe that clears the desk?
That clears the desk.
Thank you very much. We are adjourned.